So it's going to be a different draft, but we're going to make sure you experience the same raw emotions that we always see.
The first ever virtual NFL draft is officially open.
Get me more weapons if I'm Kirk Cousins.
All right, here we go. Vikings pick. Let's go.
The Minnesota Vikings select Justin Jefferson.
Oh, we got us one.
We got us one. I got me one.
Stillman, I'm the general manager here. I just want to congratulate you. Can't tell you how excited you're going to be a Minnesota Viking.
Thank you. I can't wait to show up.
Trade alert on the team. We went back. We traded back.
The Minnesota Vikings select Jeff Gladney. Ezra Cleveland
have taken DJ Wanham out of South Carolina.
What a draft.
What's up, Vikings fans? I hope you're staying safe, staying healthy. Welcome to another edition of our Vikings at Home show. I'm your host, Gabe Henderson, and we have a loaded show today for you guys. We're talking all things NFL draft, and coming up on the show, we will have a panel discussion with some of your favorite analysts, including voice of the Vikings Paul Allen and ESPN's Courtney Cronin. But before we hear from them, let's send it over to Ron Johnson, who recently sat down with NFL Network's Nate Burleson to assess some of the Vikings' top draft picks in this year's draft.
So I'm here with Nate Burleson. Everybody knows Nate Burleson. He is worldwide now. He's on Rachel Ray. He's on the NFL Network, Game Day. I mean, this guy's all over the place calling games. So you look at this receiver class in the NFL as a whole. A guy like Tyler Johnson goes in the 5th round.
Yeah.
What do you think about this class and how deep they were?
Yeah, it was very deep. And you would assume a guy like Tyler Johnson with his talent, he'd go earlier. And then if you look at his draft grade, his ability to make a big play, like you look at the guys before you, and then you have an understanding like, okay, I can see how I got overlooked and slipped a little bit. Like I went in the 3rd round, there was a good group of guys. And like we saw this year, man, you got to think about it, man. Like CeeDee Lamb going to the Cowboys, Henry Ruggs to the Raiders. Justin Jefferson. Like you have to think about like what he's going to bring to the table, especially with them missing Diggs. So it's tough when you see guys slide, but you also understand it when you see so many picked before him.
Yeah, and looking at the Vikings, so you talk about Justin Jefferson. Zimmer had holes. Diggs left. Offensive line has always been a question for the Vikings. Cornerback. I mean, I think every cornerback other than Mike Hughes left. All 3 cornerbacks left. In the 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round, he filled holes right away. He got a cornerback in Dantzler and Gladney. He got Justin Jefferson at 22, which people thought he would be a top 15 guy. And then, of course, he goes and get Ezra Cleveland to play offensive tackle, or, who knows where they're going to put him.
Right.
What do you think about that Vikings class of those kind of early 4?
I always thought when it came to free agency and the draft, keep it simple, and let's not trick ourselves into doing something that isn't going to help the team. And think about how many picks they had. Like, it's not easy to go out there and execute it. But you said it. You see a hole, you fill that hole. You have a void in your team, you fill that void. Diggs goes, they get the draft pick, which for them, it started before the draft by trading Diggs and getting that pick. They go get Justin Jefferson, who had monster numbers, 100 catches, 1,500 plus yards, 18 TDs. Like, that's like, Madden numbers, you know what I'm saying? So that he's a guy that's used to getting targets. So with the way that Kirk Cousins can grip it and rip it, he's going to come in, he's going to be familiar with that type of workload. And you mentioned the cornerbacks, you have to fill these voids. And if you can do that with young guys who are going to be on that young rookie deal, then it's easier for you to build around. And like you mentioned, you got Ezra Cleveland, and I kind of joked about it on the show. We don't know exactly what they're going to do as far as piecing the puzzle together, but if it's going to be the Cleveland show, then the only way we can describe that line is that's nasty. You know what I'm saying? So like, I feel like Cleveland comes in with a great nickname, and they're going to have a great running game to match it.
So with all that said, with the Cleveland show, I forgot about that one. So with all that said, with the Cleveland show, you're going to sit these guys down and give them a grade. What would you grade them on their draft class?
I would say that they got an A. And I looked at a few different, publicity, publications that went out there, and there was an A-, A+, and an A. And I feel like they're right around there, man. With the amount of picks that they had, literally addressing positions and not panicking and saying, oh, well, he's the best available, so I guess we got to get him because that's the pressure of the NFL during the draft. No, they were like, you know what, we're going to get guys that fit our squad. And if you look at where they're from, I feel like these guys have played some decent ball, some big-time ball. There isn't too many guys that came in, kind of like me, I guess, where it's like, you put up crazy numbers, but Trenton have had a Reno. So, like, is that going to apply? There's always like a shake of the dice when you pick a guy from a school that doesn't really have the same level of competition as the players you have on your roster. And that's not the case. The Minnesota Vikings, they selected individuals that are going to come in right away and understand what their expectations are.
If you can go back in 2003, what advice would you give yourself knowing everything you know now?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I would first start with, remain humble. Humility in this business will go a long way. Once you stop running fast and jumping high and basically doing whatever you got to do for this organization to make money, you're going to have humility because that next chapter isn't going to be like the rock star lifestyle that you're living. And with that said, understand that it's an illusion. It's a small grain of salt and the lifespan that you're going to live. And it seems grand and it seems so exaggerated, but like, don't get fooled by everything. And, we like to keep it real. The money that's coming in crazy, take care of your money. Save more than you spend. Don't get lost in the sauce. Looking in the mirror and thinking that the world revolves around you. And I'm saying that because, I've lived this life. And also, when you're on the field, though, understand that you're meant to be there, like at every moment, because the NFL will build you up. They'll also knock you down. Let's parallel this to life. It will knock you down. Like you wake up, whether you're working at a cubicle downtown, you're a politician or a football player, like there's times where people will tell you how great you are. You're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then the moments where you really want people to show you your worth to the company, to the organization, to the team, that's when they start to tear you down. In those moments, like, don't waver, because I've had those moments, whether it was me bouncing back from one of my many injuries, whether it was tearing my ACL, breaking my arm, trying to save a pizza, or it was just me not having a good game and waking up and listening to everybody, reading the paper and having more confidence in what some random writer is saying about me than I have in myself. So just always know who you are, man. If you walk around like you're a lion in the jungle, then you'll always be able to conquer it. So those are just some tidbits of advice that I would give to young Nate and any young player that's about to start this journey.
It's always great to hear from the former Viking, Nate Burleson. As many of you know, the Vikings set an NFL draft record with 15 overall selections in the 2020 NFL draft. 9 of those picks coming on the defensive side of the ball, while the other 6 on the offense, highlighted by the 22nd overall pick, wide receiver from LSU, Justin Jefferson. With the offseason departure of guys like Trey Wayne, Mackenzie Alexander, and Xavier Rhodes, there were some obvious voids for the Vikings to fill heading into the draft. After the selection of Justin Jefferson in the first round, the Vikings used 3 out of their next 7 picks on cornerbacks. Vikings fans, I have some names I want you guys to start getting used to saying. Jeff Gladney, Cameron Dantzler, and Harrison Hand. To help you guys get more acquainted to who these guys are, we brought in our own Pete Burstitz, who broke down some film on our newly drafted cornerbacks.
Thank you, Gabe. That's right. By the time the smoke cleared, the Vikings ended up with 15 different draft choices, 3 of which were corners. What do you say we turn on the film and take a look and see what we can find out about each one of them? The first corner that we're going to talk about is Jeff Gladney, first round, 31st pick overall. And what Gladney may lack in size, he definitely makes up for in physicality and toughness and his speed running a 4.48 at the combine. So one thing you'll notice is he's not afraid to roll up and jam wide receivers, and that's something that we do with our defense. That's something that Zimmer's going to love. Here is a long crossing route from one side of the numbers all the way to the other, and Gladney has the ability to hang with that wide receiver all the way across the field, break underneath, and bat that football down. And the beauty of it is the technique. You see it from the end zone. The receiver puts that long arm out to jam Gladney, but you know what? Defensive players can use their hands too. He just gets enough tug of the jersey, slows him down, stays in his hip, extends, and makes the play. And I'll tell you what, those are the little techniques, those are the small things that a young corner has to learn to be good at the National Football League level, and Gladney definitely has that. Now, the thing I love about this play is this is a cover 2 type situation. Gladney at the bottom of your screen, he's rolled up. As soon as he sees that receiver in front of him do the hitch route, he turns his shoulders, steps underneath, and intercepts that football. And oh, by the way, he turns defense into offense, bringing this ball back almost all the way to the 40-yard line. So 2 great plays by Gladney, one of which shows his ability to cover down the field and play man-to-man. The second one shows you how well he can play zone. With the Vikings' 3rd round selection, 89th overall, they take Cameron Dantzler, cornerback out of Mississippi State. Now, he has more of your stereotypical size, 6'2", 188, ran a disappointing 4.64 at the combine. But again, you watch this young man roll up, doesn't even really jam the receiver, but he's able to turn his hips and run and then get underneath and make a play on the football. So if we're talking about speed and you're worried about speed, his ability to turn and run right there proves to me that he can run. Now, one thing I do love is he uses his body to pin the wide receiver to the sideline and make that quarterback throw in that narrow window. Gets his eyes turned around back to the ball, comes very close to intercepting it, but the technique is very, very good. Now, one thing that all 3 of these corners that we drafted can do is blitz, and you'll see him on the bottom of the screen. You've got the defensive end, the outside linebacker running up the field, opening up the hole. He finds his way through that mesh, through that muck, and gets to the quarterback and brings him down right away. So, aggressive play by all of these corners that we've drafted. And finally, in the 5th round with the 169th selection, Harrison Hand out of Temple. Now, Harrison Hand, a 41-inch vertical, has explosiveness, but he also has a lot of awareness. Now, we see Harrison mainly in zone coverages on the film. On this case, tight end going to the flat. He knows that tight end is running that little corner route behind him. He's able to keep his eyes, keep his shoulders square, get back. Now, you'd love to see him intercept this football, but at least he gets his hands on it and breaks up the play. And finally, we get to see Harrison in the red zone, one-on-one, at the bottom of your screen, pressing the wide receiver. And when he makes contact at the receiver, his shoulders are parallel with the end zone. That way he can look back at the quarterback, see the football coming, and jump up and bat that football away. So all 3 of these corners that the Vikings drafted are very aggressive. They vary in size, but they all have very, very good ball skills, and we've seen on tape in college, they're not afraid to roll up, jam receivers at the line of scrimmage, run across and play man, and oh, by the way, when they need to play zone, they do a very good job of reading patterns.
Always good to hear from Pete, and as we continue our breakdown of the 2020 NFL Draft, I'd like to welcome in ESPN's Courtney Cronin, voice of the Vikings Paul Allen, and welcome back Ron Johnson. So, guys, a couple of topics I like to discuss, starting with PA. And, Paul, as we look at this 2020 Vikings draft class, we got a lot of guys to look at, apparently. Who do you think can step in and be an immediate impact player for the team in 2020?
Well, Gabe, first and foremost, I'd like to officially welcome you to the Vikings Entertainment Network, at least in virtual mode, and let you know that I do not look like this all the time, I promise you. Hi, Ronald, Courtney. I think, with Justin Jefferson, I mean, from a value standpoint, I'm still amazed. A week ago, he was available at 22. You hear the importance of Jefferson learning to beat people on the outside because he's a slot guy. I disagree with that. In 2018, he was phenomenal playing predominantly on the outside. So I think we definitely hit on a Rookie of the Year candidate there. Value-wise, 4th round, James Lynch. He's relentless and kind of getting an idea of what the head coach wants to do with him as of now. Position flexibility, I think, is going to help him a lot on the defensive line. Gabe, I know you recently worked with the Washington Redskins. James Lynch reminds me a lot of Matt Ioannidis. And if he could be 85 or 90% of what Matt is right now, holy cow, I love James Lynch.
Ron Johnson, we're going to send it to you. Who's your guy?
Well, of course, I like PA's take on Justin Jefferson, and I'm always, going to love receivers. But I'm going to have to go with Troy Dye. You look at a kid who's 6'4", 226 pounds. He's a little bit thin, but he does have that ability to put some more weight on that frame and get to 235. But when you look at the Oregon defense, For 3 years, he played in a 3-4 defense, so he does have some ability to play inside. But then last year, they switched to a 4-3. So when you look at him being a weak side linebacker, he could fill in with an Eric Kendricks and an Anthony Barr. He can play third downs because he covers tight ends and running backs pretty well with his speed. He ran a 4.48 in his makeshift pro day. And so a guy like that, I think, can come in and definitely be a special teams guy and probably a solid backup, but he is going to have the ability to make some impacts on some games.
I like that. And Courtney specifically said she wanted to go last, so the floor is yours, Courtney.
Well, Gabe, I had 15 draft picks to choose from, so I wanted to go a little bit in the weeds here. We'll start out with Cameron Dantzler, the 6'2", 185 cornerback who calls himself the Needle. Out of Mississippi State, the Vikings used a third-round pick to get him, and as somebody who could potentially compete for one of those outside spots, I could see a battle between him and Holton Hill in training camp that would certainly make for a fun position competition. He does need to put a little bit of weight on his frame. It was something he was doing in the pre-draft process, and that will have to continue at the NFL level. But the Vikings now have 11 cornerbacks on the roster, so they were able to accomplish getting some depth in the draft. Somebody I'm really intrigued by is the 5th-round pick, Harrison Hand out of Temple. The Vikings love him because he's instinctual, smart, he has good size, 5'11", 197, and had a really good combine. Broad jump, vertical jump, all off the charts, and I think he presents the Vikings with some position flexibility. Right now, he looks like a developmental corner who Mike Zimmer can mold into what he wants, but he's really physical against the run, so maybe at the next level he transitions to safety. He's also played a little bit of nickel, maybe he can go into the slot, but really high upside here. Huge fan of this pick, and maybe he could make some noise next season as a rotational player and potentially as a depth piece.
Hey, Gabe, off what Courtney just said, you know, the Dantzler at 188, I mean, I think that's a phenomenal take. And, you know, when I talked over the weekend with Mike Zimmer about it, he's not concerned about that weight at all. And Zimmer really, really likes Dantzler a lot. But put it in perspective, man. He's 4 inches taller than Jeff Gladney and weighs 20 pounds less. So I think it's definitely something that's going to have to, when they get out on the field, man, something we're going to look for. And when they get out on the field, that competition at cornerback is going to be phenomenal. Trying to figure out where Mike Hughes is going to play once that neck is good, that intrigues me. I'd put him on the inside. I think they've always liked him inside more than outside. But I think Courtney hit on some really, really good talkers.
For sure. And PA, we're going to keep it with you. Who are some good players that the Vikings drafted, you know, in these later rounds that can potentially develop into a star on the team? I know there's a 7th round guy that stands out to you.
Yeah, you know, the deeper it got, obviously with all those picks, like Courtney said, you know, it was markedly more than I think anybody thought. You know, I came into this thinking it was going to be one of two things, Gabe. They were going to end with like 9 and then hope the majority of them can help now, or murder by numbers, and that's what he did. Brian Cole is a 7th round safety from Mississippi State, who's very intriguing to me. Brian is built basically exactly like Harrison Smith, probably not as muscular in the arms at this stage of his life, but he's a former wide receiver. From what I understand, he just has an innate ability to do 2 things that intrigue the Vikings. 1, pick up quickly on the route wide receivers want to run. You know, I think Ron could really appreciate that, being one of the great gopher receivers in the history of the program. And secondly, is Cole has an innate ability to blitz and to sell the blitz when he's not coming. In fact, that may be top of the charts when it comes to his calling card at this stage of his very young pro career. So Brian Cole intrigues me.
Brian Cole can be anything like Harrison Smith in year 1. I think Vikings fans will love him. Ron, who's your guy?
Well, I mean, there's a ton of guys out there, like Courtney said, with 15 picks. I mean, you can go with the safety from Michigan. That kid can come in. I like KJ Osborne out of Miami, a receiver who can be a kick return, punt returner, because we know we don't need Mike Hughes back there. But I'm going to go with a guy named DJ Wanham out of South Carolina. He was drafted in the 4th round. He has size. He's only about 265 pounds. So he's another kid that can probably put on that grown man weight as he gets older in this system. But if you watch his tape, that's what got me. When you watch him go outside, he goes inside. And remember the Saints game when Zimmer put his D ends on the inside. He's a guy that's comfortable moving down to a 3 technique and being just fine. He did that in college at South Carolina, and he created a lot of havoc for quarterbacks. So I think he can be another project in Zimmer's defense, that he can move this guy around and he can stand up as well.
Courtney, we saved the best for last.
You did, and I'm going to go with the player I share a name with. Courtney Davis, the wide receiver out of Texas A&M. Most draft analysts had him with a 5th or a 6th round grade, and he fell to the Vikings in college free agency, arguably the best value pick they had the entire day 3 of the draft. A 6'1", 201-pound receiver, played a lot in the slot. It's where he thrived. As an Aggie, not afraid to go over the middle of the field and make some really tough catches. If you go back and watch that game against Alabama, watching him go up against some of college football's top cornerbacks, he's not afraid to get physical, make some really tough contested catches, which will certainly translate over to the NFL. Now, when we talked to him on a conference call last week and asked him where he prefers playing, he said he actually likes playing more on the outside, likes to be left on an island one-on-one with cornerbacks and have a chance to sort of disguise his routes. So that position flexibility will certainly help his case as the Vikings try to figure out what they're going to do with their wide receiver depth chart. But it's important to note that he had a chance to go either to the Dallas Cowboys or the Minnesota Vikings, and because Stephon Diggs is no longer on this roster, he sees an opportunity for himself to crack the depth chart and make an impression, and he's wearing number 14 while doing it. Certainly has some big shoes to fill.
Guys, thank you so much. And also a huge thank you to the Vikings fans that tuned into this edition of Vikings at Home. Stay tuned to Vikings.com for more coverage as we prepare for the 2020 season.